Hello, Faith family. I am Cheryl, one of the worship and music pastoral staff here at Faith Methodist Church, and welcome to today's Midweek devotion. And today's passage comes from Luke 20, 1-8. So one day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, "Tell us, by what authority you do these things? Or who is it that gives you this authority?" Now, this is not the first time that Jesus' authority was questioned. In Matthew 12, the Pharisees accused Jesus of wielding demonic authority to drive out the demons, to which Jesus responded to their absurd accusation by asking them, "If I drive out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your people drive them out? So then they will be your judges." Yet the Pharisees did not let up. The scales were still on their eyes, and they were not able to see Jesus for who he really was. So in verse 3 it continues, "He answered them, 'I also will ask you a question. Now tell me,' verse 4, 'was the baptism of John from heaven or from men?'" Now this time when Jesus' authority was questioned, instead of directly answering them, he instead asked the question back to them regarding the authority that was bestowed upon John the Baptist. Now, just to be clear, Jesus wasn't being evasive. He was not trying to be coy with his answer, trying to be sassy. In fact, to pose a question in response to a question is an acceptable form of debate and conversation among rabbis. And this is used to seek deeper thought and more clarification. So this is quite similar to how parents or teachers talk to their children when children ask them questions. "Oh, why is it like this?" Or "What is this?" Or "Why is the sky blue?" And then the parent or the teacher will go, "That's a good question. What do you think? Why do you think it is blue?" So it is intended to engage critical thinking, and that's what Jesus wanted the Pharisees to do, to engage in critical thinking. After all, he had been giving them the necessary breadcrumbs to lead them to the logical conclusion that he is the Son of God. There was no need for him to spoon-feed them information because these were learned religious leaders. They knew the laws back to front, front to back. And they were supposed to know what was of God and what was of man. So when Jesus posed this question back to the Pharisees, it should have been a very simple, clear-cut answer that they would have been able to respond immediately. And yet in verse 5, it continues and it says, "And they discussed it with one another, saying, 'If we say from heaven, he will say, why did you not believe him? But if we say from men, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that John was a prophet.'" Now, Jesus' very simple question led to a dilemma in terms of the response that the Pharisees would give. Yet, in their dilemma and their discussion, it is clearly seen that they have completely missed the whole point of Jesus' question. Instead of being introspective or engaging Jesus in further sincere discussions like what Nicodemus did in John 3, they instead sought to protect themselves and their ego. They valued their pride and their faith and their lives more than God's truth. And hence, instead of seeking truth and seeking God to give them the wisdom and the revelation to how to answer the question, they leaned on their own flawed human logic and pride to get an answer. So in verse 7, they answered Jesus. They answered that they did not know where it came from. So their response after their whole discussion, passionate discussion, is, I don't know. It wasn't a genuine response of, I really do not know. Can you, shed some light into this? Could you enlighten me? But this was I don't know. I'm saving my face here, so I'm just going to end the conversation. I don't want to continue this with you. If I were in Jesus' shoes, I would have been disappointed. Was this the best response that the religious leaders of that time could have given and come up with? If they had answered correctly that John the Baptist's authority came from God, good on them, well done. The scales had fallen from their eyes. Jesus would have the opportunity to deepen their understanding of God. If they had answered incorrectly and said that John the Baptist's authority came from man, that was okay too. It's okay to make mistakes. It would give Jesus the opportunity to once again remind them of God's authority. Either way, Jesus would have had the opportunity to share God's wisdom to the Pharisees. Yet, they chose the unsatisfactory, answer. When I was teaching in a primary school, I was a music teacher at that time, and sometimes during music appreciation classes, I'll play songs and I'll get the children to draw, write, or describe how they would feel according to the music. Some songs are slow and relaxing, so they would describe it as a boat on a calm water, trees rustling in the wind, or how they felt calm and warm and embraced by a parent. And some songs were fast, intense, passionate. And there was one student that I had who used a black crayon and scribbled really furiously on his paper, because that's how the music made him feel: frustrated, angry, and full of intensity. Now, my students were able to draw and free to draw anything and everything based on how they felt according to the music. I told them there was no right or wrong answer. And any weird response would spur more conversations. Oh, why do you draw it this way? Which part of the music made you feel this way? And it would spur more conversations about how different people perceive music differently. But through these music appreciation classes, I always start my lessons with, don't tell me I don't know or I'm sleepy. If you don't know, ask, clarify. Don't say, I don't know, and then just leave it as that, because that's when learning stops. The I don't know mentality that my students used to bring to class was one that just shut the door to learning. It was a very passive, spoon feed me, I don't want to know anything, you just tell me what the right answer is kind of mentality. Now, I was their music teacher, and I was there to inspire them to think deeper, to broaden their mindsets. And I'm not making mini clones of myself. I wanted them to think for themselves. And I did not want to dictate how the music should make them feel, because it is a personal experience. What I wanted to do as a music teacher was to whet their appetite in this domain, in music, and develop that passion, that interest, to the point where when I was no longer their teacher at the end of the year, or when I had left the service, that they will continue learning on their own, continue experiencing different forms of music, continue to learn deeper, maybe pick up an instrument. And this could only happen when they were willing to listen and learn. I mean, as the saying goes, you can make a horse go to water, but you can't make it drink. So as the passage ends in verse 8, Jesus said to the Pharisees, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." And with that, with the response that was given to Jesus by the Pharisees, Jesus knew that they were not ready to listen. The scales were still on their eyes. Their ears were still covered. Their hearts were hard. And there was no point in explaining to them whose authority Jesus was working under, because there was no point. They would not be able to learn, they would not be able to listen, because they had the I don't know mentality. So faith family, in what ways can we humble ourselves to God's authority? What attitude do we have when we receive God's correction? Do we question God when things don't go our way? Do we shut down that conversation with God because of our unwillingness to listen and to be corrected? It's not wrong to question, it's not wrong to ask, it's not wrong to be angry. But the moment we let the I don't know mentality take over, and we do up to you, I don't care anymore kind of mentality, that's when we become the Pharisees in this story. Let's not take the attitude of the Pharisees in this passage, where we only seek to prove our right instead of truly seeking God's truth. God bless.